I've been reading some of the things that critics have been writing about your work. Somehow it seems to me that critics are struggling to come up with labels to like transcendental cinema, spiritual cinema. Also this very dubious notion to me, which is a slow film. So why do you think there is this need to label or to come up with short definition to describe your film? And more importantly, have we arrived at a situation when the dominant mode of cinematic expression, or the word film in itself, has come to signify the Hollywood standard, polished narrative, polished dialogues, polished characters, and everything, as diverse as it might be, that is different, has to be defined in relation to it or against it, or somehow there is this dialectics nowadays?
Well, I was going to give you a broader, probably more philosophical explanation, but I think your explanation in the question is better than what I was going to say. Actually, you're right. It is just that. This Hollywood form, it's not the things made in Hollywood, but the things made in Hollywood and the rest of the world that have this shape and all this philosophy behind them, are so mainstream, this mainstream is so big, so broad, it takes everything.
Also rich.
And rich, of course, and everything beyond the stream is just, it's just some, like rubbish. And it goes against, against the current. And today is probably the time in history where the current is strongest in every sense, social and political, especially social sense, with all the social media and all this. It's the world of today is definitely not designed for the people that do not conform. For example, if you like ordinary things, you go to any hotel, you travel, you put Netflix on the TV and you're happy. Same thing with music, same thing with almost everything else. But if you are not into that kind of water, then you are always somehow excluded, you see? So you have to find ways around this. And in a way, this is also beautiful because the ones that are not in the stream will be able to swim stronger and faster. But what I was going to say is a little more broad, and it is that because we are far from the idea of being, few of us can relate to this idea of just being and enjoying being. So we need to classify. This is like an essential problem of the Western mind, which is 3,000 years old.
So therefore your films create even bigger problems for critics and also audiences in general, because it's somehow difficult to capture in words the effect your films have on us, the viewers, because it somehow transcends words. I don't know if I'm expressing it correctly. We have to rewire our brains somehow. We have to let go of our general mode of perception when we know how to feel about certain characters, we know how to feel about the story or the plot. We have to switch on sensorial and most of all, intuitive perception. What would you say about our role as viewers?
Sure, you have to be in a different mindset. But I wouldn't necessarily say turn on an active system that will stop all those elements so you can connect in another level. I would just go exactly the opposite way, which is to be truly passive, to be able to be humble. This is something we don't say. These are words we don't use anymore.
As a viewer.
Yes, exactly. And I say this also for myself when I'm a viewer, to take what you're seeing for what it is. So you just have to be completely passive, because we judge immediately upon seeing, because we belong to this time of classification and cognizance. So we're judging all the time. So we're not able to see, we're not able to perceive, and therefore we cannot receive. So it is more about, it's not about being especially intellectual or making an effort to be there, It's exactly the opposite. It is to be able just to sit down and receive, and it's a question of humbleness. So it's a spiritual question rather than a mental question. This is my point.
But we as viewers have to also make meaning out of. So
No,
how do you
we
combine?
don't.
No?
We don't. Meaning forms by itself in human beings. It's like, well, for example, probably you like to see mountains when there's new snow on them and you enjoy them, don't you? I mean, most people do,
Yes,
for a
I do,
while.
yeah.
Do you need to make any kind of significance out of them? Do you?
No.
No.
It's just there.
They're just
present.
there, and they mean and of course they can be meaningful, and they can enrich your life in ordinary human communication. Again, it would be more like caressing, you know, like love, like kissing someone else, someone you love, and enjoying his body, his soul, his breath or hers or whatever. You wouldn't need to make any sense out of that. Mm-hmm. But it's not, that enjoyment is also philosophical, and it means something critically too, and even politically. It's not that it just, but what I'm trying to say is that the sense will be constructed naturally on top of the enjoyment of being.
Would you say cinema has become the least intuitive of all other arts nowadays, given the culture industry, given the commercialization, like compared to, say, music or poetry or literature even?
Yes, I would say there's two reasons. One, again, I always agree with you, but I compliment, because one is, of course, let's say the business side of film. It is expensive, people make money on it, and it is basically an entertainment, and there's a huge entertainment industry around it. And then we also, and I think cinema more than an industry, as some people say, I just said an industry around it, it is an art. But I would say, or a specific artistic language, probably, not artistic language, just an art. But what I would like to say is that even on that side, it has suffered very much since the 50s, late 50s, by the application of structuralism to it. You know, the structuralist mind.
So European cinema.
Well, let's call it auteur cinema
Okay.
all around the world. The structuralist approach to judging it started also going into the makers. So the makers are always thinking about this thing, what things mean and what things stand for. And this is the terrible thing that has happened to cinema, disregarding all the Hollywood thing and all the commercial part. Also in the third cinema, and this is maybe even worse, it is this that has damaged cinema so much and made it so intellectual.
When concepts come
in the
yes,
first, exactly. Thinking of cinema as concepts and as meaning, yes, as meaning, all the time meaning, and trying to apply language forms into it. So it becomes symbolic, and when things become symbolic, things lose the mystery, because the symbol is closed, then the symbol is meant to stand for something. But the actual fact is that that mountain we were talking about a few minutes ago doesn't stand for anything at all. This is the whole point, that life doesn't actually have a meaning, an objective meaning. Mm-hmm. Actually, life doesn't even have a morale. Life doesn't talk to us. There's nothing like the good and the bad. It's only the way we read what we go through. And if we're capable of stepping back there, then we really can construct something that goes deeper.
You often speak about film or cinema as a medium that is here that can or is capable of capturing existence, of being present here and now. And at the same time, you have this very complex understanding of reality as precisely not something here and now, as something comprised of our past, our images of our future, our desires, our dreams, our fears. So it's never simple. I know it's a very abstract question, but I still had to ask you, what is the difference between presence and reality for you?
Yes, I would have to say that what I would oppose to presence would not be reality, would be representation. Mm-hmm. Again, I think the way we read cinema today and the way we make cinema today is an act of representation, reproduction and representation, very much like the theater works. But actually, the camera, the cinematic camera and the sound devices can capture presence, and I will now try to come to reality, can capture presence in a direct way. So instead of creating or making cinema with presence, you make it with representation, you are not making cinema. You are illustrating literature with images.
But is it possible not to make representation? Because you're still representing something, no?
No. Exactly. It is completely possible. But this is the quid of the question. Exactly. Then we come to structuralism again. Yes. It is a principle of this way of approaching knowledge and understanding that everything stands for something and everything means something in particular. And there's been huge discussions about this, but that's why I talk so much about the pre-adult mind, when things are not significant of anything at all. My point is, an image is not necessarily a representation. It actually captures the atoms and the molecules in front of it. One thing is that you may manipulate it and use it in a specific way, but the camera itself will reproduce whatever it has in front. So if you would see now, right now, a photo of your house or your car now being burned, right now in the middle of this interview, you would probably interrupt it and go and try to stop the fire in your car.
Without thinking what it means. Yeah.
No, because no.
It's there.
Forget about thinking of what it means or not. You would know your car is burning right now. Your office is burning right now. This is reality. So what I'm trying to say is that an image is reality transposed to another medium. It is, so a photograph, for me, it's not the representation of the person photographed, but just a transposition of the real person into another means. So now your atoms and light right here in front of me, and if I would take a photo, you would be ink on a paper, but it would be you. This is the actual philosophical difference, which is so important to me. It is not a representation of you. Look, for example, very often.
So what is it? A presentation?
Exactly, it's a presentation in a different material. In a different material, it is a presentation of you. Exactly, this is the important thing. It is not a representation. It would be if I would make a drawing, but this machine is actually capturing your presence. Very often, for example, I am asked, or people say to me, "Oh, I really like the way you represent the human body." For example, because there's very often like naked bodies.
We'll talk about that.
I always say, really, do I represent the body? I've never thought of that. You know, I go into a steam bath, there's people lying there walking around naked, and I see them, and then I want to have photographs of them, and in sound, and an image, and I ask them to be still or to move. I place the camera in the best position, and I take an impression of these people. So and this goes through to the cinema, and there's no representation. Of course, someone will say, this is not possible in the absolute. I would say,
at some point, yes.
Yes, I would agree. I mean, we would have to think very deeply and, you know, like write in words, how maybe could there be like just a theoretical exception to that. But let's accept it. Yes, there will be some representation. But the slightest, the better. That's what I would say.
I'm sure you are being asked this question a lot also, but is it the case that somehow you might be continuing this tradition of this law, real maravilloso, as we know, the magical realism in literature? Magical realism doesn't differentiate between dreams and reality, between indigenous knowledge and the modern knowledge. It's just one whole thing where everything is valid equally. This is somehow the perception I get when I watch the neon-lit devil, for example, roaming around the modern apartment, Costa Nebras looks, or the head exploding. Is it a conscious homage to magical realism, or is it something completely different?
I think it is completely different.
In what ways?
I think magical realism is basically stylistic, and always implied, just because in the word magic there's a positive approach, usually in this sense of magical realism. So it's always, it pretends to poeticize in a good sense. Like, for example, I don't know, someone is walking and behind there's 1,000 million sheep, or a clothing that goes on forever and probably, you know, takes the dust away, something like that. But I think in what I'm doing, there's no intention of poeticizing anything at all.
No metaphors.
No metaphor, and especially not a positive, beautiful metaphor. Everything is just one single thing, as you say, but in a very ordinary way. And if you would ask me where I've never had thought of magical realism. I thought of Jung, rather. Carl Gustav Jung, when he says present consciousness is just the equivalent of a cork, of a bottle of wine cork floating in the ocean. And the ocean is the unconscious. I mean, probably he's exaggerating in the amounts, but I'm very aware of the fact that the projections of the future, very importantly, we don't talk much about them. Of course, the dreams, the memories, what we long for, actual reality, all those things constitute reality for sure. What I'm thinking now is also real in this moment. Actually, it's absolutely real as I would talk.
But I'm sure a lot of people ask you, what does this devil mean? Because it's so accentuated and it's so different. So and the meaning always, people want to have the meaning.
Exactly.
So how do you answer?
And the real good question, I mean, the real good way to answer, although I don't want to do that, it's like, what does this mountain mean? The mountain you're looking at with snow, what does it mean? It doesn't mean anything. And then people say, no, but it's evil, because it's just that it's a devil. You can analyze what he does, because one thing I want to say is I'm not into subjective postmodernism or anything like that, or full relativism. It's not like it means whatever you want. No, it doesn't mean whatever you want. It means just look at it. What does it mean? Okay, let's talk about it. A devil opens the door, comes into the house, walks around. He goes to the rooms. He sees the child. He looks at him. The child looks at him. They don't harm each other, so it's for sure he's not an evil guy. He doesn't do any evil, at least. We know he's meant to be evil, but he doesn't do anything. And then he goes to the parents' room with a toolbox in his hand and closes the door. So that can mean a lot, but it's up to you to interpret. So it probably means that all the construction of evil is related just to the adult mind and actually has nothing to do with the child, and the child only sees an image that he's probably been told about. Mm-hmm. This is what actually happens. So my point is that the film is objective. This is very important. I always say that my films are like a glass. I'm trying to give you a glass, like this glass is or a vase or a cup is something objective. You can put it in your hands. It's brown or transparent. It is cold, and you can put inside whatever you want. But what I'm giving you is objective. It means what you're saying, that a devil came into a house and then went into the parents' room after looking at the child. That's what it means.
Children are very important in your films, and there is a certain point being made that children and nature and domestic animals are very much contrasted with adults in terms of innate calmness somehow. Mm-hmm. If there is such a thing as transcendental cinema or transcendental scenes, it's actually the opening scenes of your films, especially Post Tenebras Lux, when we see your little daughter playing or calling the animals, running around. That's when actually really something metaphysical comes in. We feel it. It's hard to verbalize it. So is it that you see something in children, in nature, in animals, which gets lost afterwards as we enter into adulthood?
For sure, I see that, yes. I think basically when we say anguish or the problems of the human being, we're talking about something that develops in adults through what technically would be a corruption of the mind. I don't think this would have to be the case. Although I know Heidegger talks about the angst in the positive way and how this makes us want to understand the meaning, etc. But this could exist in a completely different way than it does. But this all would be mental construction, and I can do it. But the truth is that I personally feel my childhood very nearby, very present in my life. I think I think of my childhood every day of my life, and I remember well what that felt like, definitely, and that felt like that girl running on that field. I remember the feeling of the water. I remember the smell of the grass. I remember the footsteps of the animals. I remember the voice of my parents and their friends laughing. and the horrible smell of cigarette smoke coming up to our rooms. And all that, even in its unpleasantness, the smell of coffee that I didn't like when I was a child, all that is very close to me. And I remember there was total peace in my mind. The concept of peace didn't even exist. It was just ordinary life. But that I remember very well. And it is always close to me. So I always bring it forward.
And there is no method or some technical tricks that you have to explain how this out of this worldly energy comes in certain of scenes. Like, what is it?
Yes.
I know it's a very difficult.
It is a difficult question, so I have to answer with something that is difficult to apprehend also. But to be honest, it's quite simple. It is just. You will probably think this is a trick answer, but it is. You said outworldly, but I would say, if you just relax and see and observe, and not conceptualize, then it will come through. It will all come through. All these things come through to the camera and to the sound device almost by accident. You just have to make sure you get all the codes out.
But you stage it, you script it.
Yes, for sure. For sure, I did. There's huge design behind it. Nothing of this can be done without construction. You will not just go out and find it like that. You have to build it, yes. So this is the part where cinema requires huge activeness, huge action, thought of how you want to do things. But once you're doing them, then your mind has to become very passive. So you are capable of letting the machine work. The problem is that people very often want to use these machines as they were, probably like a hammer, the camera. And it should be used as a net. This is not a hammer or a brush that moves around trying to construct. This is something that once the construction is there, it is like the net of the fisherman that you just have to throw and let things come. For example, the beginning of Post-Tenebras looks. We all know that when the sun goes down, very often there's beautiful colors. We all know that water can make beautiful reflections. We've seen animals, and many of us like them when they're running around. And we like little children because they talk to us in a very simple way. All of this is easy, and we all have access to that. The water wasn't there, so we brought some trucks and put the water there because it hadn't been raining. So we did construct it. But that's all. This is available to everybody. And then the sun was going down, and I just shot. And I have to tell you something, because there you probably have a point, and I'll try to make this very practical. The DOP said this wouldn't work because we really needed to do it earlier, so everything would be well exposed, and then with color grading, we would have to push the lights. And I insisted this could work. And he said it will not expose. And I say, if it doesn't expose, it doesn't matter. I'm going to shoot silhouettes. So I did it myself, and my child was running after me, my girl, and I just said, shout cows. And I was screaming at the dogs, and this is my world. So I just had to put these very practical, simple things in the proper place, and it was done. So it's completely not outworldly. This is the crazy thing, you see. This is completely worldly, and I just mentioned 4 real simple elements: water, mountains, end of the day, animals, and children.
So it's just enough to really look.
Just look.
And
just
it comes.
Look and be brave to put all that you see, put it together, and be able to apprehend it.
Brother. Hola. exercise. Papi.
The problem is that this is so simple that people say, no, this must have a trick. But the part which is not simple is not to be afraid.
But you understand what people mean when they tell you that it is outward or transcendental or metaphysical. It's something.
Oh, yes.
When you watch it, you don't watch your films.
No, but I do, and I've seen the beginning. I mean, I don't, but I've seen the beginning of that film many times.
That's like magical.
Yes. But yeah, when you say metaphysical, the thing is, yes, I see it. But my point is that the metaphysical
comes in.
Is very near us.
It's very physical.
Very near us. Very physical. It's all around us. We just have to stop being afraid and trying to make sense and trying to speak to everybody and trying to make ourselves understood and trying to make a point and trying to create significance. This is, again, I come to structuralism and I come to semiotics. This is the disease of the contemporary world, and that's why we don't understand each other.
To move to themes, I don't want to use the word stories or narratives, obviously, but thematically, a lot of your films, when it comes to adults, seem to concern very palpable problem of some lack or dissatisfaction, or since you mentioned Jung, psychoanalysis would tell us that we're actually born with this lack, and that's our driving force, and that's the force for creativity as well as many bad things, but we are born with it, we die with it, we always feel something missing. In your films, though, it's more, to me, more class connected to middle class, urbanized people who seem to have it all, but they are very unhappy and dissatisfied. Am I reading it correctly? You come back to this and try to explore it further, and why do you think that? How do you explain this lack?
Yes, I would say the context I use of middle or middle high class, whatever, the people that have things, and the opposition with the ones that have much less, would just be the vehicle because, in Mexico, because that is, again, my duty to be loyal to that reality. That's what you see there, so I have to be loyal to that. But this is a general thing I see. Again, I come over and over, because I'm a Westerner also, to this idea of the Western mind, the separativeness we have from the actual world or existence. So we are craving all the time for development, for more means, for better technology, for more material, for a better material life. But we are not more happy.
But your characters also have relationships, families. Post-cerebral looks, our time,
yes.
They have families, children, but they are unhappy. Something's missing.
Yes, for sure. There's one thing, as you say, that would probably be essential, but I think that essential unhappiness would show somewhere else. What I think the kind of unhappiness I'm trying to show, it all connects to the fact of being away from the self, from the idea of being.
And now I want to come to this trope that these unhappy urban middle-class people go to remote areas. From Mexico City, they drive, Mexico City?
Yeah, Mexico
City.
Yeah.
And then somehow they either live out on a ranch or a big house in our time in Post-cerebral, or in the case of Japón, the man is even rediscovering his passions, his sexuality, eroticism, and lust for life in the end, who is suicidal, is driven on the edge of suicide, while having people from different culture, very oppressed, marginalized peoples whose cultures have been destroyed 5 centuries ago, roughly, as their saviors in the case of Japón, or as just background. That is a very well-established colonial trope, very Orientalist, some even would say. You managed to avoid it somehow. That is a very political question. I know you don't like reading, decoding direct political messages from your films, but how is it that you, on a very basic level, show the same thing, the same situation, without falling in this pitfall of Orientalist understanding of exotic cultures, they know something, but they are still not modern, but they have some wisdom, and they are here to help us, only here to help us.
Yes.
You see what I mean?
Yes, I totally see. It's a very complicated matter because it requires a lot of words.
I know.
But I was thinking that I would have first to relativize the part of the oppressed and the ones that are not oppressed. You know, indeed, the destruction of the pre-European societies over there is enormous, infinite. People cannot even conceive the scale of it today, I think, especially European former colonialist empires. But it was huge. And but then there has been a rebirth, and I think people, as you say, you said in your question, marginalized from the countryside, are definitely not worse off than most of Mexicans in the cities, middle class, struggling for a better life.
You mean economically?
I mean in actual, yes, economically, but that I don't mean the actual liquid money you have in your hands, but the access you have to a real quality of life. Housing, the real food you eat, the spare time, the time with your family, and that kind of thing. Of course, education should be much better. But it is bad in the cities too. And the fact of the struggling, the capitalist is struggling for the people in the cities, for me makes their quality of life much worse than the people on the countryside. So to start with, maybe these ideas that I have in this perception of reality that I have personally leads on to the solution of this problem that you're asking me. How do I avoid it? Maybe because I don't think that way anyway. So for me, I remember when I was thinking about Japan, I was thinking about this man who is a typical man from the 60s. I don't know, maybe here he wasn't so common, but there he was like someone who talked about Jean-Paul Sartre and said he had been in Prague and, you know, fighting the Russian tanks and like, and then talked about this existentialism all day long and Arthur Koestler and the idea of suicide. And then I just thought he goes to the countryside and he meets a woman who actually is just very kind-hearted and doesn't understand much, but in the end shows her that it is maybe arrogant to think that you can take your own life just because she's so attached to life itself. So that was all I thought about. But then I thought, and this is not thinking, this is a principle, I had to be loyal to reality. So by being loyal to reality, if I do the countryside, it has to be countryside people. If I do a man from the city like this man that thinks about suicide, it has to be this kind of man.
Who was your friend, not an actor?
Who was a friend of my father, yes. So if you just follow what the actual world is presenting, then everything comes together by itself. But you just have to follow it. You don't have to impose your perception, your intellectual perception, semiotical intellectual perception of the world on what you are going to do. You just have to be loyal and humble to accept what reality imposes on you. So I just did that and it went that way. And for example, the sex at the end, which is meant to be like deconstructing what we typically think of sex or whatever. No, I just thought if a man has sex with a woman who is 25 years older than her, this is the way it would happen. And I just shot it the way I think it would happen. I'd never been in exactly a similar situation, but if I can imagine maybe a similar situation, I think it would probably go more or less like that. I actually didn't even know how it was going to turn out. But I just prepared everything, and then the net, the fishing net, captured that.
But again, it makes us realize many political things about depiction or representation of sex on film, because we actually realize that we're not seeing, first of all, it's a very awkward sex scene because of many different reasons, but we're not used to seeing elderly bodies as sexual, or same thing for the fat or obese. Battle in Heaven, it makes us realize that we are not actually used to seeing real human bodies. We are seeing these slender, beautiful plastic bodies and plastic sex. You don't think about contradicting the...
Let me tell you how this works, and if you would see if you would talk to the people when I made it, you would confirm this is real. Basically, yes, what you're saying is also in the back of my mind because I'm also a Western mind. Or a Western product, or a product of the Western mind. But actually, for me, it was much more simple. For me, it was most of the people I see in Mexico City resemble these people in this film, which are fat. You know, Mexico people are obese. Some people even said, "Oh, you're representing monsters." And I was thinking, so you think these ordinary people are monsters? But they are the real. But normal. Just go to Mexico City, go to the subway, and 95% of the people are like them, like these people. So I was thinking, I just have to be loyal to reality.
You just follow reality, and then the political point emerges.
Exactly, because my point is that I don't think that way. I don't think about what we're used to seeing on films, for example. I went to Kazbegi yesterday, and I saw people drinking coffee on the way because we stopped. And there were old women and old men. And I thought that they would probably be having dinner conversations. How is it at home with them? How do they talk to their children? And I can imagine them, how do they have sex too? So now in Georgia, right now, there's older people having sex.
Elderly, young,
exactly,
fat,
all
thin,
sorts of people.
Exactly,
all sorts of people. So we could just shoot them on a film and on a sound device and capture them. That's as
and
far
the
as
fact
it gets.
that it was so shocking from the Battle in Heaven, that scene was so shocking. Critics were labeling many different things like grotesque. What does that tell you?
Yes, and also the Todd Browning film, Freaks.
Yes, really?
I'm shooting freaks.
They said that?
Well, it just shows to me, yes, very often, especially Americans. It just shows how hypocritical people are, how racist, how despising, how unaccepting of everything they think is different, but at the same time how most of them pretend to be exactly, or think of themselves, no, they don't even pretend, it's even worse, they think of themselves as being exactly the opposite of that, like accepting, loving, beautiful left-wingers, open spirits, open minds, etc. And they're just being so racist, because I shoot these people just because I think it is my duty to give them a voice and give them a space, especially because they never had it in Mexican cinema, in the so-called golden times of the Mexican cinema, which is all the cliche time of cinema. I give them a space, and then they think I'm shooting freaks. And so they think, basically, I would want to ask them, the people who wrote this, so you think all these people on the metro here, if you go to Mexico City, are freaks? Yes, exactly. They would never say that. They would say, no, only in your film because you're shooting that, but actually I am convinced now that you ask me, what do I think that's what they think, that they are freaks.
And I still need to ask you about the actress in Japón. How did you, I know your approach to acting, and you often cite Robert Bresson, but you have some also differences with him, the actual people embodying different people, but also bringing their own personalities to it. But this character, even from your array of wonderful earthly characters, stands out. She definitely. So she has some saintly, again, otherworldly features. So what was your method? How did she embody this character?
I was luck. In that case, I have to say that I have to honor luck. And I'm grateful for having had it. Basically, I had chosen a woman after, let me tell you how it happened, because all that I've been telling you, I found out, also representation again. I was preparing that film, it was my first. I was not completely opposed to the idea of using actors. So I saw Mexican actresses in the city, beautiful, wonderful people that know very well their trade. And I would talk to them, for example, Monday and Tuesday. And then I would go on location Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, for example. And I would see more people. And I would talk to people, all sorts of people, all the time. So I would talk, for example, to a Mexican woman from the countryside who was 60 or 70. And I would hear her talk, and I would think, oh, I love this, and this is so beautiful. And she doesn't have to represent it. This is the way she talks. But then when I was with the Mexican actors in Mexico City, she would represent, if you want, how would a person from the countryside talk? So she would be doing that accent, and it was never right. It was a representation. This woman that I had chosen, which was similar to the one that there's in the film, but surely not so good, the day the shooting started, she ran away. And she left just a note saying, I broke my hips and I went to the hospital. But she never mentioned where, or she just disappeared. She lived on her own, so I couldn't find her. So during the first 2 weeks, we were very nervous that we didn't have the main actress. And when we were shooting, I remember very well the part where they kill the pork and they sell the meat. I told everyone in the crew all the time, be attentive. Any interesting woman over 65, 70, try to stop her if you see she's interesting and let me have a word with her. So this woman came to buy meat.
Oh, okay, so
at the butcher's. Yeah, it was a butcher house, whatever. And someone in my crew, actually my assistant who was really good, saw her and said to me, look at this woman, come immediately. So I started talking to her like, what are you buying and where are you from? Oh, and we just started having a chat. And then I really liked her smile and her voice and the way she talked. And eventually I told her what I wanted to do, and she said she had to ask her children. I mean, her children, her sons and daughters, they were already 40 something. So we went to her house, we talked. For them it was all kind of strange. It's never easy, you know. This is a woman that had never been naked in front of anybody apart from her husband. But they were helpful, even though they never fully, some of them never fully understood, but they just said, we believe in this guy. Again, another act of humbleness, which these people are so prone to, these people from the countryside there. This kind of mentality, it's not only countryside, it happens in the city too. But when they trust, they don't need to understand. Mm-hmm. They don't even want to. It's a waste of time. Marcos, the guy in Battle in Heaven, for example, again, someone asked him, what is the film about? And he said, I don't understand anything.
But I'll do it.
It's so boring, but I'll do it. Because I like Carlos, basically.
For you, yeah.
Yes. And then the guy in Postenebras looks also, he said in the end, I remember I invited him to many presentations, and he always left or just slept on the theater. And then one day, finally, I saw him, he went for lunch to our house, and he said, I finally watched the film, and I think it's all right. And I said, and so how did you like it? And he said, well, I think it's all right. I don't know so much because I saw it all in fast forward. Which I found hilarious, really.
That's great.
Yeah, so it's really great.
No Daniel Day-Lewis or Meryl Streep for you, ever?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I don't want to say ever, because maybe one day I will change my mind and try to do something else. But that's not the kind of thing I'm interested in. No.
Method
definitely.
acting or acting?
No, I'm not interested in representation.
I need to ask you about Our Time, your latest film. It concerns, again, this very sensitive and complex themes of relationships, sexuality, so-called open marriage as such. And it's a very daring film also, because you play the main protagonist, your wife plays the wife in the film, so you are exposing yourself, and you know that people will perceive it as somehow autobiographical into your most intimate space. Now I'm not going to ask you if it's autobiographical or not, because first of all, I don't think there is not a thing that is not autobiographical when somebody creates. To me, what's really interesting, I have rarely seen such brutal and gentle at the same time take on masculine identity, masculine thoughts and fears and anxieties. It's even very humorous, the juxtaposition between this world-renowned poet and then this American trained horse trainer who comes in. And the issue of control overall, that's so important. Again, I know you don't think about big concepts, and I'm sure you didn't think like, let's make a film about how fragile male ego is, but did it just come itself in the end, or were you still thinking a little bit about these issues?
Well, first I would have to say that I agree with you that it can be very funny because of the absurdity, which actually belongs to human life, to humans. That we are dramatic and intense and everything, but in the end, pretty funny, I think. I wasn't so brave, this is my point, because I didn't realize how strongly certain things would be perceived like in the external world. But some people now think I am a manipulator of women or something like that, of my wife in real life, you know, like
based on this
film?
film?
Based on the film, exactly. It is so absurd, and some people even have said, like, you know, sometimes things go wrong in thought, and like that it is a macho film, which I just don't get it, you see. But well, I didn't realize those things, and it is a sensitive time for those things.
How is this a macho film?
I don't understand.
Incredible. It's
I
precisely
really
the opposite.
It's exactly the opposite. I just don't understand. But because some people say, I mean, it's primitive thought, but probably some people I've heard say, well, he objectifies the woman and uses her as a doll, therefore it is a macho film. Something like that, you see. So,
but the poet and the horse trainer, like why the poet and why the horse trainer?
Well, the poet, because indeed the guy in the film very probably is a good poet, a real poet, and that doesn't stop him from being a poor devil, you know, which is exactly what happens in ordinary life. People, now you would say, oh, Marcel Proust, oh, great guy, etc., blah, blah, blah. Very probably in his time he was your neighbor and you would think he's an idiot and you wouldn't talk to him. I don't know, I mean, I wasn't there, but this has happened throughout history all the time, you know. It's very different to fantasize and to make out of people heroes. And so I really wanted a poet to show that a poet is not necessary. Well, Rimbaud was a slave trader after he was a great poet. So probably when he was a great poet, he was thinking of slaves too, I don't know, you know. The thing is, nothing is again a simple concept. Nothing is against a symbol. Nothing is closed. A great poet is not a symbol of an important man. It's just a great poet.
But this American does something to his masculinity.
Yes, no? And then the American guy, I don't know. Well, I was going to say the American guy is a horse trainer, but in the end, he probably doesn't even exist. You know, it's more like I really wanted this American guy to be a simple, not very. I didn't want the film to be like, who should the woman choose? The intellectual, older guy, or the new young blood. It was more about just the need in the brain of the woman, you know, like what was going in her internal process. So I never thought much about the masculinity of the wrangler, the horse wrangler, but maybe in a more subconscious level that I didn't consider. As I told you, I really try to, I don't ask myself why, as I said in the master class, I want the stream to come forward. Mm-hmm. So maybe there's this part of, you know, also it's really interesting how the men have to fight for sex somehow. And I don't mean the men, I mean the masculine. Bulls, for example.
Yes, that's a great metaphor.
Exactly. All the cows get to have sex
ironic.
Whenever they desire it. But the bulls, they all desire to have sex, but only a few get it.
And you show it in the film.
And I show
actually
it.
As primitive, male, human masculinity, machoism, is as primitive as the bull's energy.
In all gregarian mammals, all the women, not the women, all the females get to have sex whenever they want to, and the males only the ones that are strong enough to be the alphas. That is a fact. Some people think this is what kind of things is this guy saying? I'm just describing how the gregarian mammals behave. Dogs, apes, bulls.
And it is also, to me, I'm surprised to hear the word macho film, because to me, you will probably again not like it, but it is a feminist movie. Because the final phrase the wife tells the husband, I don't know, I saw it in Russian translation, I think, or English subtitles, I don't know how exact it was, but I had a dream that both of you, the lover and the husband, were mocking me or taunting me, and no one helped me, and I hate you both. Or that to me is also the scene when she goes to hear the concert, and there is this wonderful lady playing the percussionist. This female rage really comes through. It's very palpable.
Of course, for me it's so obvious. And in this sense, if you would take, for me it's a completely feminist film, especially in this sense of feminism being a subversion or a rebellion against a system that is really so deeply rooted in the world. There has to be a rebellion. So it's a rebellious film. So in this sense, it's definitely a feminist film. I don't
So you agree?
understand. I completely agree with that point completely.
I'm so happy to hear that.
100%. 100%. I just don't understand how is it that there can be some people that not only don't see it, but think the opposite.
That's, yeah, well,
You see,
you
again,
can't control people's perceptions, but I am surprised too.
But it's again this thing about when you don't want to codify fully, but let the viewer exist and come to his or her conclusions, then this can happen, which is in the end good, you know. If it was so obvious that it was this or that, it would be much less interesting.
And before I let you go, I know we're running out of time, but Silent Light, your masterpiece, 2007, is one of your earlier films, very different from your other films in terms of texture or feel. I don't want to use the word style. Again, we have this theme of adultery there, but it's not presented in this way it was problematized, say, in the 19th century novel, that people are going to find out, or society is going to find out, or my husband or my wife. Yes. Everybody knows everything. It's just between the person, the man, and his God, because it's a Mennonite community, very devout Christian, Protestant, small community in Mexico. And the most important conflict is between the man and people he really loves and cares for, and the inevitable pain that he has to inflict upon them. So it's a different, very intimate depiction of the problem of adultery or lust or passion. And if you could tell us a little bit about the filming of the rain scene and the death from heartbreak.
Yeah.
Where did this come from? And also technically, this crescendo, the rain, the sound. How was that at all possible?
Yes. Well, first I have to tell you that I completely agree with the subject matter of the film. That is exactly what it is about all that, the only things that really matter in cases like this, like the real true things, you know, the conflict with yourself and the pain of causing pain to the ones you love, because he surely loves his wife and he surely loves his lover. So the terrible pain of causing pain.
And why the Mennonites?
Yeah, why the Mennonites? Because, well, I would say definitely I love places and people and clothing and, you know, the things you're going to apprehend with the camera. So this is a beautiful place and I love the way these people talk. I love their faces. I love their clothing. But beyond that, it is because this would permit me to get rid of all the things that can get in the way of the conflict itself, which is, again, class, if they talk this way or that other way, if they're from the city, you know, there's money issues involved. So I wanted it to be as philosophical as possible. You know, when you talk about philosophy or logic, simple logic, you say two people going up the mountain, blah, 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 and this happens. You never ask, oh, and who are these people? Is he the father of the son? How old are they? Are they wealthy or not? It doesn't matter at all. So I just wanted, or in a joke as well, when you tell a joke, it's just two guys do this and that. So it's archetypes, just two persons. So
simple.
This is simple, yeah. A lover, a wife, a father, the father of the father, the grandfather, whatever, and children, and the friend. It's just that. So this permitted me to get rid of all these things that get in the way of pure archetypical thought. I remember, I always say I never know very well what my films, I know as I said, the subject matter in general terms. I know the texture, I know the place, I get to know the people, but I don't know the plot. I never know the plot of the films. So I sit down and usually in 2-3 days, I write the whole script. I know everything. It's not, I mean, I know everything, but I don't know the way it will go. So this script, this plot goes that way. And one of the engines, I mean, maybe the main engine of this plot when I was writing, where I wanted to get to was death out of pain in the heart. Just because I felt something similar to that in my life, and I just thought it was so intense, so terribly intense that it could kill you. I don't know if it can kill you, but that's the way I felt. So I really wanted someone to die out of that, and the way it happens. And
so it was really raining.
It was not really raining.
No?
No, this is the beautiful thing. We were just doing it with fire engines, like really primitive, only 10 people in my films, very, very few means, because that's the way I like to work, but working with time, you can really get it very well. And then when she goes out of the car, I really wanted real rain. So we waited for a whole week, and it would start raining, and we would take the cameras out, and it would stop raining, and then there was wind. We were really unlucky. There were rattlesnakes. I remember it was really a huge disaster. But we were having really good fun. That whole week, just 10 people waiting, 12 hours lying on the grass waiting for the rain. And in the end, we got desperate, so we just waited for a small rain, and we were covered with these hoses of fire engines. And but the beautiful thing here for me was that Miriam Toibes, the actress, the wife, who dies by the trees, she really could invoke pain. Not the pain of the actress, but the pain she had because of her father's death, which was quite tragic. So she invoked it, and she feels such pain that it serves the film so well. And this is the way I work. I try the people to bring their own lives, their own feelings, everything around, so the cinematic language will construct the characters and the feelings and the ideas, and not the actors themselves through a process of acting. So she did invoke all the pain, and she felt it, and we were just throwing water on her, and we just filmed that. And this, together with the addition and everything, created all that big moment you were talking about.
Incredibly emotional scene, one of the most emotional scenes in the history of cinema, I would say. And I could go on, but unfortunately we have very limited time with you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so
Carlos
much.
Reygadas, thank you so much for being
Thank you very much. Thank you.
On our show.